So, my brother and I, we kind of grew up on Pokemon. Around here, a lot of kids did. It worked out perfectly for us, too. Every time a new generation came out, one of us would get one version, one of us would get the other, and since our mom liked to spoil us, we both got the third version. This is going to sound at first like a bittersweet story about two siblings who grew up with a couple of games that eventually take them down two different roads. Well, it's a little more than that. The years rolled by, we kept collecting, Game Boys got old, we replaced them, cartridge batteries finally gave out, we picked up new batteries, but we started down two completely different roads before Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald came out. See, around then my brother got a Game Shark. We'd heard all the hacks and cheats you could do with them, even if we were kind of late to the party, but they did sound awfully cool. Our first test game was my brother's old blue version. We just screwed around with it a little bit, nothing major. But whatever we did fucked the cartridge up, and after a couple of code entries, and a couple of glitch Pokemon, eventually we ended up breaking the game. It glitched out and became unplayable. It would just boot to the Game Boy screen when we started the game up. My brother angrily threw his game at the wall, but I consoled him as I was sympathetic. It's okay, we can replace it, I guess. Stupid shark was a waste of money. Here's where our paths finally differed. After seeing the mess it had turned Blue version into, I had become opposed to the idea of hacking or cheating any of my games. What can I say, I'm a chick. I felt feelings for the little pixel pokies. At least with that Game Shark, I turned away. But my brother had taken that in a different way. He took his game's destruction as a personal challenge or something. I don't think he ever played a game after that which wasn't hacked somehow. Yeah, we played a shit ton of Pokemon. But for us, there wasn't really much to do anyways. We live out in the country without many other kids, and the farmers didn't want us on their property. So we played Pokemon out on the lawn just about all day, every day. It was pretty awesome to us, at least. We lost the Game Shark when our rooms got moved around. A new addition was built onto our house, and it disappeared in the mess of shit that had got stuffed into the new closet. Ruby, Sapphire, and eventually Emerald arrived, and after playing through them, we were both in agreement that they were lacking compared to the last generation. We both tried another honest playthrough, and though we managed to finish, it left us both yearning for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. Where were our old gold, silver, and crystal cartridges, though? It probably took us a month to dig through the boxes we'd been too lazy to open up before, but we finally found one with a shitload of our old electronics. My old atomic purple Game Boy still worked, and his red one could no longer hold the batteries in place. Both of our Game Boy Advances were fine though, along with our snake lights and link cables. That one with the nifty little connector in the middle that I had always wrapped up oh so carefully to avoid fraying the wires and condemning it to the trash like our last cable. We both grabbed everything we could. It was so nice to have Yellow, which had been my first and most cherished game of any series, not just Pokemon, and Red, and Gold back. We went through the motions of checking our old files, taking in all the old memories, and eventually we figured the Gen 1 stuff was just too nostalgic to get rid of. I restarted Gold, he restarted Silver. Immediately he snatched the Game Shark out of the box and slipped it back into his GPA. I just shook my head at him, and I remember reminding him, "That thing will kill your game, you know." He never liked me preaching to him about abusing pixels. I shut my mouth after that. He reassured me he'd be more careful this time as to not corrupt his games. After a couple of days, I was out on the porch, Game Boy in hand, just about to go to the Elite Four, when I realized my team was ill-balanced thanks to my playing through for leisure, and at the time I was no great trainer that could pull off gimmick runs, such as beating the game with only one type of Pokemon, so I was severely underleveled. I knew that my brother had been 2 badges ahead of me when we last checked with one another, so I was hoping maybe he'd let me borrow a Pokemon or two for this run. Not anything OP like a glitch Pokemon, just something to get me through the Elite Four. I had just arrived after a long day of school. He got to stay home because he was sick. For all I knew, he could have been done with his game and moved on to a new one, which I figured was all the better for me since he wouldn't need those Pokemon and I'd stand a better chance of getting a few. So I got up and went into the house, and when I was crossing the living room, I noticed all of his Pokemon games lying on the floor. Some of the cartridges had been mangled, like they'd been hacked at with something sharp. Even his old Dead Blue version was ripped apart in pieces, almost unrecognizable. I was a little scared. This had to have happened this morning, otherwise our mom would have seen, and they wouldn't be lying on the carpet. Tucking my Game Boy in my pocket, I crept over to his room and found the door unlocked. That was even more concerning. Usually he likes his privacy. I walked in and saw my brother sitting on the edge of his bed. His GBA was in pieces on the floor. Next to him on his bed was a hammer and our mother's gardening shears. His face was paler than I'd ever seen it. It was also now that I noticed the Game Shark lying on the ground, and a silver cartridge corner poking out from under his bed. Somehow they'd been spared the wrath of the hammer. "Are you okay?" I asked. I remember the chills that ran through me. He was my little brother, and seeing him like this was horrifying.
"Oh God, white everywhere, and black."
I remember I ran over and hugged him tight, worried about his condition. He faintly hugged me back, but as soon as he felt my Game Boy in my pocket, he let out a blood-curdling scream and threw the Game Boy across the room. I cried out at the dent the plastic system made in the wall, running over to collect it. The screen had gone dark, and though I feared the worst, when I flicked the switch it powered up normally. I waited there in the corner, trying to pretend the GBA mattered enough not to go and run for our mom. As soon as the Pokemon theme started up, he ran at me with the hammer, screaming to give him the game. I sprinted towards my room, with my Game Boy clutched to my chest like a shield. I locked my door and shut it tight, but he kept banging on the door, telling me to come out.
"AJ, open the door! Open the door!"
He ended up in the psych ward of the hospital for 2 days. When I went to visit him, I made sure to leave my Game Boy at home. No one could figure out what had set off his strange manic behavior. There was some talk that I didn't understand at the time about some kind of disorder he may or may not have had. But even though Mom and I had collected and brought up all the cut-up cartridges to be looked at, Mom's idea, not mine, no one had even thought to tie it back to the game. Maybe that was my fault. I didn't say anything about what happened when he accidentally touched my Game Boy, or the blind terror he'd been thrown into when the music started, or even him chasing me to my room. I didn't want him to get locked there forever. On my last visit to the hospital before school, on the second day, I was left alone in the room with him while Mom had some private talk with the doctor about precautions to take should this happen again. Whenever we saw him, he would mostly lay down on the bed staring at the ceiling. He would only talk very faintly. But this time, he sat up and grabbed my arms.
"Angie, go in my room when you get home. The box with my games in my closet, destroy them all. Throw them away. Just get rid of them. I don't want to ever play with them again."
His voice was so weary and desperate. I didn't know what to say. He sounded like his life depended on it. "Are you sure? Those are your games." He stared me in my face.
"Promise me, listen to me. Promise me you'll get rid of them."
Okay, I promise. I arrived at school late, and through the whole day, I only had my promise to him in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time I could ever play the big sister role and help him out. I just had to get rid of that game. I promised him. As the day went on, a sick curiosity started to go through my head. What could have possibly happened to that game that scared him so badly? Was it a sick prank from one of his friends? I had to find out. I got home and went right into his room, bent on uncovering whatever horror had scared him so much. Mom had since vacuumed the room, and the cartridge and Game Shark were no longer visible. I got down and crawled half under the bed, feeling timid, but holding on to the promise I made as my badge of courage. Under the bed, there was enough dust to make me cough, enough old Legos and various other toys that I couldn't set my elbow down without it landing on something. But I finally saw both objects. They'd been shoved to the corner, on top of a notebook that looked too new to have been down here long. Not thinking, I grabbed the corner of the paper and dragged everything out with me, still wheezing from the dust, allergies and all. They looked so innocent, simple toys and a simple spiral-bound bunch of papers. When I set Silver Version and the Game Shark on the floor, I took a closer look at the notebook. On it were scrawled at least 20 different cheat codes, but one had been scratched out with Sharpie over where it had initially been drawn in with pen. This was confusing. He had really tried to erase it out. The marker had been pressed to the paper so hard that the ink soaked through most of the pages behind it. Almost 2/3 of the way into the cardstock back cover, but pen has a way of sticking around. I picked up the notebook and tilted it backward in the light, and the reflective surface of the Sharpie revealed the indents of what had been left where he'd written. The code was unintelligible, but the words next to it confused me. Easter egg, snow on Mount Silver. I remembered what he said when I found him. He'd been raving about white and then black. Could he mean snow? Even though it was only August, and the temperature was still pretty warm, a chill ran down my spine. Do I dare try this game? I picked everything up and brought it to my room, and laid it out on the carpet in front of me, with my own Game Boy next to it. For a long time I just stared at it. The longer I looked, the more strange Lugia's face became on the sticker, like it was daring me to find out what had happened to my brother. I was a 14-year-old kid. Did I really want to tempt fate and risk ending up like him? I glared down at Lugia for a while longer. I had to find out. I took gold out of my GBA and stuck silver in its place. It took me almost 15 minutes to compose myself and turn it on. It's just a game. It's just a game. It started up normally. I left the sound on low, too afraid of what I might hear if I kept it all the way up, and too curious to turn it all the way down to mute. The title screen was normal, Lugia swimming through the ocean. How bad could this be? I asked myself. His notes said Easter egg. Didn't that mean that the coding was in the game already? Maybe it was an unused Easter egg. I started up the game. His character was Blake, with a mostly filled Pokédex, but the time was odd. 999 hours and 99 minutes. I knew for a fact he couldn't have played that long. Probably some sort of result of the Game Shark. Took almost a minute for anything to change. The game started up, and the first thing I noticed was a prolonged black screen. And there was no sound at all. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up already, but it was too late to turn back. Finally, a very dim sort of map came onto the screen, but it looked like static. What was going on? I squinted down and realized with a fearsome pang that this was actually the Mount Silver map. But what I thought was static was heavy falling snow. This is where he must have saved his game last. I checked his party. A very normal team for someone who'd been using a Game Shark. Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, and Lugia. All level 100 with moves they shouldn't have. Though the sprites were strange. They seemed sullen in a way. Their colors seemed washed out, and their expressions lacked the usual vigor that they usually had. I chalked this up to missing pixels or something. Probably a sprite glitch due to the hacking. After I closed out of the menu, the map was a little bit more visible. Pixels danced across the screen so fast it was hard to see the little sprite that was my brother's character. When I went to the trainer card, something was off about him. It was the same as the Pokemon sprites. The colors were dull. In fact, now that I thought about it, he almost looked frostbitten. My stomach tightened, and I turned and tried to move back down the mountain. As I hit the exit, words popped up, and there was the sound of my character hitting an invisible wall. I can't turn back now. That was unsettling. I went into my Pokemon and tried to use Pidgeot's fly ability. I can't fly in this. Obviously referring to the snow. I went into the bag and I tried using an escape rope. I can't go back anymore. What was going on? Once again, I tried to walk back down the mountain, and to my horror, the words changed with every attempt. I can't run away. I can't go back down. I can never go back. The last one sent a chill down my spine. I had to climb the mountain. Turning the little sprite around, I moved him forward. No resistance at all, though my walking speed was oddly slow. I just chalked it up to the snow. As I moved further up the mountain, my walking speed became slower and slower. The snowfall grew thicker, and it made it harder to see. It seemed like the only way to move was straight ahead. I reached what looked like a set of stairs at the very top edge of the screen. I don't remember this being there before. As I tried to move up, the little sprite paused. I'm cold. By now I was getting goosebumps. What kind of Easter egg is this? Was this even meant to be in the game? More text appeared as I walked forward. Meganium has died. What the fuck? I thought to myself. Pokemon don't die, they faint. I checked my party and was confused by what I saw. Meganium's sprite has been replaced by a red X. And all of my other Pokemon had damage even though I hadn't battled once. I went into my bag and found a single revive and tried to use it. It's too late, it said. There wasn't much I could do. Trying to turn around yielded the same messages as before. So I kept moving. Pidgeot has died. I checked again. Sure enough, there was the little red X. This time I selected it and looked at the Pokemon summary. Looking now, I wish I hadn't. The sprite was mangled. Pieces of it were missing. What was left was splotched with a sickish blue-gray color, and its eye was a solid black pit. I flipped down to Meganium. Same deal. A leg missing, a chunk of its neck, most of its head, pitch black dead eyes. It was almost like these Pokemon had died of frostbite. I kept moving on. More and more text appeared as I kept going. Lugia has died. Feraligatr has died. Tyranitar has died. All that was left was Typhlosion. I hit the summit. It was deserted. Red wasn't where he was usually. The snow stopped falling, thankfully, so I could actually see. In the very center of the map, there was something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a Pokeball. Okay, maybe all this creepy shit led up to some climactic final battle using whatever was in there. If I picked it up, maybe Red would come out of hiding. I walked over and examined it. There was a sudden burst of static noise from my game that made me jump. What appeared on the screen was a battle animation. My trainer sprite appearing, his skin tinged blue against another mangled Pokemon sprite. It was Celebi. Celebi used Perish Song. A screech came out of my GBA and I almost dropped it as the screen went white. Part of me was relieved, thinking my final Pokemon had been KO'd and I'd be transported to a Pokemon Center. But I was wrong. I checked my trainer card and felt sick. The sprite was just as mauled as the Pokemon had been. A leg gone, only one eye, and looking so sad. Tears welled up at the corner, and every color on him was replaced with those 6 shades of frosty blue and gray. Every stat on the card was reduced to 0. Except for the time, of course. I quickly moved back to the map. His sprite there mimicked the horror of what it had become on the trainer card. Pieces were missing and everything was discolored. I tried to walk, and I received a message. It's so cold. There was only one direction to go, upward. I moved on, and every now and then would be stopped by a message that made my heart sink each time. Mother, it feels so cold. I can't go on. The walls as I walked were getting darker and darker, until they were pitch black at the end. There was an exit there, only marked by a white outline. I had no other choice but to go through it. It opened to a chamber that was also solid white. The only way to distinguish the walls was a thin gray line that marked them as separate from the floor. Against the far wall, there was another sprite. Red. I had come this far. I had to finish it. I walked right up to him and hit A. He said nothing, as Red usually does, and the battle started. Red's sprite had none of the deformities that marred my own. The colors were the same blue and grays, but he was intact, though he looked sad. His first Pokemon came out, Venusaur. It was mauled and destroyed like mine was. But level 0, and with only a small amount of health. I sent out Typhlosion, who had just 6 HP left. Venusaur used Struggle. Only a single point of damage was done to Typhlosion, and then the recoil damage killed Venusaur. Venusaur has died. Red sent out Blastoise. Again, it used Struggle, and died. Red sent out Charizard. Part of its wing was missing, and it was a terrifying sight. It used Struggle like the others. Charizard has died. Snorlax was crying blood, and its organs were being pulled out of its stomach. Its rib cage was exposed. I pressed on. Snorlax has died. Espeon was missing its ears and its tail, and its forehead was exposing its skull. Espeon has died. Eventually, Pikachu came out, and it was the worst of all. It was discolored like the others. It was missing an ear, a good chunk of its body, and its tail. But it had a giant smile that extended to the edges of its cheeks. Pikachu used Pain Split. Typhlosion has died. Pikachu has died. Red Sprite moved in, and now it looked like mine. I finally understood what happened. They were dead, and this sub-level of the mountain was the hell they now existed in. Red finally spoke. It's over. Used Destiny Bond. A horrible, hideous screeching started to erupt from my GVA. The screen went white and it shrieked at me, and I threw it to the floor and pressed my back against the bed. The horrible noise continued for several long moments while the screen stayed white. Then it went black. There was silence. It took me a long few moments, but I eventually stood up. I took the Game Shark. I took the notebook. I took that fucking possessed game, and I threw them into the fireplace and lit them, burning them for good. When I got back to my room, I don't know what made me do it, but I wanted to make sure this curse hadn't passed to the rest of my games. I picked up Yellow and put it in my GBA. The music started up. The game played. I turned to my Pikachu, and I hit A. The smiling face greeted me with an ear twitch and a big pixelated smile. A pleasant, normal smile. I turned my game off and spent the next hour crying on the floor. My brother and I never did play Pokemon together again. He gave it up for good. I stuck to replaying my comforting, unhacked games. That winter the snow fell thick, and Christmas came around. My brother hadn't asked for anything Pokemon related. I couldn't say I blamed him.